till I get up. Turn it off till I get up there.
It's very nice. Okay, we've got some fresh air in here, so hopefully we will all. Yes, it is on. We'll all stay awake. Got a couple of people walking in. Okay. In our last session for today, we've got Todd, who will be speaking to us. And I think most of you are aware that Todd is the executive pastor at Bridgeway Church. I'm always challenged in such a good way when Todd preaches or when he spoke at the school last year, and we were just absolutely blessed. I was totally blessed. If I can just boast for a moment, at one of the things that's happening in this 40-day fast is that we've got during the week, if you haven't signed up for it, get onto the website and you'll be able to get the information of where there's just a 5-minute encouragement that comes from different leaders at Bridgeway. I think it's 3 times a week we get that. And Todd, I was just really blessed by what you spoke this last week. And if you've heard it, I think the reminder is great. If you didn't, but what I really appreciated, as he mentioned, that in our fast, when the emphasis has not been so much about what we're eating or not eating, is usually what we think about when it's a fast, but it is a fast from negativity. And it is a fast in a way that allows us to spend time with God. And as we're moving into this new year, but significantly into a new decade, Pastor Peter has really referenced this. Think back on this last decade and what things have been appropriate in that last decade that now need to be left behind and move into. But Todd brought an excellent point, and I've been really reflecting on it. What are the things that God would want you to be remembering, that actually he would remind you of, so that you would continue to remember as you move into the new decade? What are the things that are sort of like those significant areas of where we've seen God work significantly in our personal lives, in the lives of other people, in the church life, in the various things? Because as we take hold of what God has done for us, we will move more successfully, more empowered, more with that presence and peace of God into that which he has for us. So I just wanted to make mention, Todd, that totally blessed me. Appreciated it a lot. It had me thinking and talking to God about some of those things as well. So could we just welcome him now as he comes to speak into our last session this afternoon.
I recognize that coming in. If you nod off, I'll forgive you over the course of the next hour or so as we share together. Characteristics of a great leader. I wondered to myself, why in the world did Norel ask me to teach this? Because I don't define myself in any way as a great leader. There's a lot of characteristics that we can look at when it comes to great leadership, and we're going to talk about some of those over the course of the next couple of weeks as we share together. But I think all of us have to recognize that leadership's a growth and process. And there's something that's taking place in us that's going to take us to another level. So hopefully you will find yourself growing as a leader. You'll be a better leader tomorrow than you are today. You'll be a better leader next week than you are this week, and next month than you are this month, and next year and next decade, and all of those things, because leadership is something that we have to constantly be growing in. But there are some common characteristics that we'll look at. But before we jump into that, here's the first thing that I want us to do. I'm going to ask you, maybe get in groups of 4 or 5 and answer this question. What is leadership? Before we can go farther and we can ask the question, what are the characteristics of a great leader, we have to ask ourselves, what are we talking about when we think of leadership? So go ahead, just give them some groups right now. Take about 4 or 5 minutes and just kind of come up with a definition of leadership. Best definition that you can get in your group.
Yeah, Peter probably. Yeah, influence, having influence. Oh yeah, his whole point was like, even though he didn't have a said title, he was the fact that he had influence made him a leader. Yeah.
So competency, somebody who motivates.
You're right on the right track. Oh, should we use that when I have them respond?
Yeah, you can.
What do you do with that? You just throw it to them?
Just throw it to them.
But what is that the characteristic of a leader? He asked the question, what is leadership? That's a characteristic of being a leader, but what is leadership?
Motivating and inspiring others to follow a vision of truth and I'm just turning on the
About 2 more minutes. Let's go ahead and try to wrap up, and then we'll get some best definitions here.
Like Kathy leading me on a ropes course blindfolded.
I think part of that is
30 seconds. What? Okay, let's come back together here and talk about some things in regard to leadership. And I gave you guys the catch box first. We're going to pass it around here and kind of hear what every group has to share. Okay, here's what I want us to listen for. Listen to some of the key things that are involved here in understanding what leadership is. So we'll have this group go ahead and go first. How would you define leadership?
Leader is someone who empowers. I mean, initially, I said if you're in a role of leadership where you have the status of leader, it would be the people under you. But we kind of work through. It's like a leader is anyone who empowers the people around them to be all that they were created to be.
Okay, so what you were talking about there first is what we might call positional leadership,
Yeah.
right? You've got a title, you've got some given authority of some kind, but yet what you're saying is maybe it goes beyond that right?
It goes beyond that. If you are empowering the people around you, the people you influence, or anyone who is around you to be the best,
Okay.
to be all that they were created to be.
Good.
That
Let's
is
go back
one
to
of
this
the-
group. Let's hear what they have to say. I'm surprised Christy Joy's talking, huh?
Okay, so I said someone who gives you the tools to be better, to do something better, or believe something better about who you are.
Okay, so there's tools to do something, and there's also that mindset of belief in yourself. Okay, those are both good qualities of a leader. I'm not sure if I would say that's leadership,
Oh, okay.
but those are good qualities.
We discussed leading from the Spirit with a servant's heart, serving your team as you help push them forward and grow in your passion, because
I am sorry. Can you start over again? Because I didn't realize you had the mic, and I was watching this thing, and then all of a sudden I realized someone was talking.
you were seeing different.
Yeah,
you were
sorry.
seeing her not talk.
Yeah,
and
go
hearing
ahead.
There you go, Christy. We did it, Christy.
Try that again. What's
Let's
leadership?
do that. All right, ready, Christy? Let's do that one more time.
I will actually listen this time.
Okay, serving from the Holy Spirit first is starting moving with the Spirit and letting Him guide your team, and being passionate about what you're doing will also bring passion into helping the others in your team grow. That way you can lead them well and serve them well as well.
Okay.
Because you're going to serve them to help grow them. And all leadership is a process. So you're always learning. And what you learn, you share with others.
Okay.
So
Hearing
it's
a lot of good
kind of like
characteristics.
role modeling.
Hearing a lot of good characteristics of leaders.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing what leadership is.
It's growing your team to move forward in a direction that God has given you, inspired you from your heart.
Good. All right. What's over here? You got that? Okay.
I do. We kind of went back and forth because there's positional leadership, and
Yeah.
then there's the qualities of a leader, and all of those things. And I think kind of where we landed is it's somebody who empowers other people to be the best that they can be, calls out the best in people, and
Similar to what
that
they
other
said
people
there.
are willing
Yeah.
to follow.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Let's go up to the next group here. Who's next? Counselor, you talking?
You talking? All right.
Once again, I'm not surprised. No.
It looks like we have a lot of the similar things that you guys have said. Some of the different ones was the ability to teach someone how to follow, and a group or individual that can impact a culture or steward a movement.
Okay. Group or individual can create a culture and steward a movement. Okay. What group's next here? There's two more groups, right?
We talked, I guess, just kind of the definition of leadership neutrally. and we said it's either influence or stewarding people. And then you can have good leaders or bad leadership characteristics within that. And we talked about a lot of the same things of empowerment or, believing in people and things like that. So.
Okay, good.
The ability to influence, motivate, inspire others to follow a vision or achieve a common goal.
Very, very good. All right. Did you Google that? I'm just wondering. Yeah, I'm going to hit some of those same things in just a second, so you'll hear some of those. Let me give you a few that I did come across, and these are plagiarized. I did look them up. Okay. Leadership is motivating a group of people to act toward a common goal. I think we've hit on that. Leadership is inspiring and directing a group of people towards action. Inc. magazine said some people define leadership this way. It's the person who's always right, and they know they're always right. They're the loudest voice in the room, and they just kind of take charge everywhere that they go. How many of you think of that when you think of a leader? If you think of that when you think of a leader, or if you have that thing in mind that thinks that's what makes me a leader, let me tell you something, you won't lead very long because nobody wants to follow, right? You have to have followers in order to be able to be a leader. So I would say the best definition of leadership that I've ever heard, you guys hit it right on over here, leadership is influence. It's really what it is at the end of the day. I heard John Maxwell say that at a conference probably 25 years ago, and I've never forgotten it. Leadership really at the end of the day is influence. It's not about a title. It's not about a position. It's not about some kind of delegated authority given to us. Leadership is influence. And when you understand that leadership is influence, you can be a leader without a title, without authority, without a delegated position of some kind. A mom in a home with the kids is a leader, has incredible amounts of influence. A teacher in a classroom with a bunch of students has an incredible amount of influence. An older sibling has a lot of influence on a younger sibling. They may never have been given any kind of title or position to say, you're over this. You got some influence. And that influence is leadership. We get so caught up sometimes in thinking that leadership is all about positions, it's all about titles, it's all about those roles that have been given to us. But I want you to understand its influence. And when you understand its influence, that makes every single one of us a leader at some level. The question as we talk about characteristics of a leader is what level of leadership are you going to be able to move into? Because we all have influence, but our influence can increase. And as our influence increases, as we get a greater level of influence based on some of these characteristics that we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks, as we get a greater level of influence, then we will begin to get titles. Then we'll begin to get positions that recognize those things. Now, what so many times happens is people are given titles without some of the characteristics being in place in their life. And then we see leadership begin to collapse because it's not about titles. It's about the influence. And some of the things we're going to talk about these next couple of weeks have to be in place to be able to have that kind of influence. So let me ask you another question. Nature or nurture? Are leaders born or are they developed? Both. Okay, explain that to me. Why would you say that? Go ahead, Deborah. Oh, yeah, let's pass the mic back there.
I think it can be both, and both can be positive or negative.
Okay,
depending
explain
if
that.
you're, well, you can be born into leadership, and then you can move in that role under dictatorship or under actually influencing and leading people. You can be developed into it, and you can either choose to micromanage under a dictatorship, or you can move under influence, like Peter empowers them, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I say it both ways, because Pharaoh was born into it, but he was a dictatorship type. He didn't actually develop people into it.
So was he really a leader or not? Or did he just have a title?
He had a title,
Yeah.
but he was a leader.
Yeah.
Because God used him as a leader.
I'm just messing with you.
I
a little
know,
bit.
and I'm having fun with it.
Anybody else some thoughts on that? Yeah, Brent.
Ready?
Good throw.
I would say developed. I wouldn't say born. I think when I think of born, I think of characteristics or like natural talent, which talent has to be developed. And also talent can be used improperly, and it would a talent that is used in leadership could also be used negatively to not be a leader. I feel like with every strength, there's the opposite side of the coin. There's a weakness involved there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it's not matured and it's not operating properly, it doesn't work as it should. And so therefore it takes development. So I feel like it's all about development.
Okay, but let me just point out what you said, okay? You said it's all about development, but you said you're born with traits that have to be developed, and they can be developed either positively or negatively. So really what I hear you saying is it's both.
Well, I mean, in the philosophical side of things, yes, it would have to be, because if we weren't born, we would never exist.
Well, yes, and I think, go ahead, let him answer back here.
A seed has all the potential of the tree or whatever the seed is, but until it becomes the tree or whatever it was designed to be, it will never fulfill the calling for which it was created.
Okay, you're getting all philosophical here. What's
Development.
that? What are you saying?
You gotta develop what's in it.
Absolutely. It is both and. It really is. Some people say that leadership's just skills that you're born with, that it's just natural abilities that God's either given you or he hasn't given you, that he, picks some people for this and some people for that. Listen, there's no doubt about the fact that some of us, because of natural skills, natural abilities, and even specific Holy Spirit giftings that are given to us, have some head starts that other people don't have when it comes to leadership. I think we can't deny that at the end of the day. But all of us can be developed as a leader.
Amen.
Again, we can become better leaders tomorrow, next week, next month, next year than we are today if we understand what the characteristics of a leader are and we begin to grow in those things. So, this is a big undertaking, talking about the characteristics of a leader, because there are a lot of schools of thought when it comes to this. What does make a great leader? Let me give you just kind of an idea how much variety there is out there on this. In their book, Credibility, Kosis and Posner surveyed over 75,000 people on the qualities they admired in a great leader. They surveyed 1,000 CEOs, and they did 150 in-depth interviews, and they did this annually for 35 years. Wow. And narrowed it down to 20 characteristics. John Maxwell wrote a book, 21 Characteristics of a Great Leader. Some of the things on his list are different than the other 20 that are out there. Dan Black wrote a book called Characteristics and Great Qualities of a Leader. He had 19 different things listed. Again, some of those things are different than the other two lists. The point is this. When it comes to understanding what the characteristics are that make up a great leader, those things that we need to grow in, those things that we need to be nurtured and developed in, there is no exhaustive list. In fact, you will notice tonight that I've given you a list of 10 things. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. I've got a list of about 25 right now, and I'm still narrowing down the rest of them, and I didn't give you the rest of the list because part 2 of this talk hasn't been written yet. And so when I get it written, I'll tell you what the other 10 or 12 or whatever are going to be that I narrow it down to at that point. But many of the things that we're talking about here are consistent across the board, and so it's really important for us to look at some of these things. So let's talk about this. Characteristics of a great leader. Number 1. Great leaders are Christ-centered. And I'm going to start with this one, and I'm just going to give a disclaimer right up front about it. I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that people cannot be great leaders who are not Christians. There's a lot of great leaders in the world who are not believers, so I'm not saying that at all. The reason I started with this one, and this is the only one of the characteristics that we're going to talk about that really can only apply to a Christian, is the reason I picked this first is because when it comes to understanding kingdom leadership, this is where we need to start. We're at Colorado School of Kingdom Ministry, right? Where we're learning how to lead in the kingdom. We're learning how to do things differently than the way things are being done in the world. And so if we're going to talk about what's the number one characteristics of a great leader, it's got to start with this. It's got to start with someone who's Christ-centered, someone who has a relationship with Jesus Christ and then lives out of that relationship with him. That relationship then between that leader and God flows out and creates the influence that they're able to have on other people. It comes through that connection with him. Let me say this about this one. This is one you cannot pass on if you do not possess. You can try all you want to lead and influence other people for Christ, but if you're not walking with God yourself, if you're not spending time with him, if you're not connecting with him, then you're going to have an empty well and you're not going to have anything to give out to anyone else. So as men and women who are in this room trying to understand not just what it makes to be a great leader, but a great kingdom leader, this has to come first. That means we have to recognize that our leadership is for an audience of one.
Amen.
When it comes to leading in the kingdom, we really lead only for the Father in heaven. We lead from our relationship with him, and we lead for him to his glory in everything that we do. When we center our lives on this relational connection with Papa and just being connected with him, then we're qualified not just to be leaders, but to really, truly be kingdom leaders at the end of the day. When we serve for an audience of one, it creates the ability to truly and genuinely lead, and here's why. You are freed from being a leader who tries to please everybody else. One of the great downfalls of leadership is leading for the masses, leading to try to make every single person happy. How's that going for you? Doesn't work very well, does it? When we try to lead from a position of trying to make everybody happy, of trying to please the masses, we get ourselves into trouble every single time. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25, what's it say? The fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts the Lord is kept safe. What's that saying? Saying when we fear men, when we think we've got to please them and keep them happy, and if they get mad at us, we're just going to curl up and die as a leader because we're living to please everybody else. It's a snare that's going to be a trap that takes us down every single time. But he said, when you understand that your fear is not in man, but your trust is in the Lord, and you lead out of that relationship with him, then you're free to be the leader that God called you to be. You know, Jesus modeled this kind of leadership. In John chapter 13, Jesus says, if you might recall, just about ready to go to the cross, and he washes his disciples' feet. Look at this passage. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and he was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. What was it that allowed Jesus to begin to make that journey to the cross here at the end? What allowed him, when he knew that there was a betrayer sitting at the meal with him about ready to hand him over, what was it that allowed him to stoop down and wash the disciples' feet? Because he understood he was living to please an audience of one. He knew he had come from God. He knew that he was returning to God. He knew that his only goal, his only thing that he needed to worry about was to please and to live in relationship with him. He could live from heaven to earth. So let me ask you a question, just to think about when it comes to leadership. Are you leading others out of a need for approval, or do you really lead for an audience of one? It's a great question to ask ourselves, because the leader who needs approval from everybody else, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but that's an insecurity that really takes us down as a leader. Are you leading just from your natural abilities, or are you leading from a relationship with Christ? Good things to think about. Here's the second thing. Great leaders have outstanding character. Every list that you begin to look through when it comes to leadership, secular and Christian alike, has some of these same things that are characteristics of a great leader. Things like integrity, things like morality, humility, honesty. When we're talking about character, we're talking about who are you really at the end of the day? Who are you really at the end of the day? I heard something a long time ago that's I've used many times, and it's this. Your reputation is who people think you are. Your character is who you are in the dark. Your reputation is who people think you are. Your character is who you are in the dark. And some leaders have a great reputation, and we find out really quickly that they were bankrupt when it came to character, and they end up falling and harming others in the process. Let me read you a quote here from William Hershey Davis. The circumstances by which you live determine your reputation. The truth determines your character. Reputation is what you are supposed to be. Character is what you really are. Reputation is the photograph. Character is the face. Reputation comes from without. Character comes from within. Reputation is what you have when you go to a new community. Character is what you have when you go away. Your reputation is made in a moment. Your character is made in a lifetime. Your reputation is made in an hour. Your character doesn't come to light for a year. Reputation grows like a mushroom. Character lasts for eternity. Reputation makes you rich or makes you poor. Character makes you happy or makes you miserable. Reputation is what men say about you on your tombstone. Character is what the angels say about you before the throne of God. Isn't that good? Man, that's so powerful, because when you really think about it, that's what we're talking about here. That's a huge difference between our reputation and our character. Now, you might think, like the first one, that this is only applicable to Christians, but it's not. There's a lot of people of integrity in the world. Good, moral people who lead from a place of character in their life who don't know Jesus. Guess what? There are people who claim to know Jesus who don't lead from a place of character in their life. Well, no, I'm not going to go there. Forget it. I can think of some examples of that. You know, people I've dealt with in business over the years, and they say that they're a Christian, and sometimes they're some of the worst people in the world to deal with when it comes to stuff, because they don't have the character in place in their life. So what we're talking about when we talk about character for sure is a kingdom characteristic, right? I mean, all of us would agree things like integrity and morality and all those things, those are kingdom characteristics, but it's not only limited to the kingdom. It's something that can be there across the board. So if we were going to think about leadership in the kingdom, I want you to turn to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 2. Go ahead and open I didn't put this one on the screen, so go ahead and open to that. 1 Timothy chapter 3, and then we'll look at Titus chapter 2. And I want us to see some things that are talked about when it comes to leaders in the church, those who are going to be elders, those who are going to be deacons in the church, as it's talked about here. Bible's taking forever to open here. Let's see. What verse? 1 Timothy chapter 3. And I think it starts right at the beginning there. Do you have it?
Yeah, leadership.
Yep, that's what I'm looking for. There we go. Now mine finally opened up. Go ahead. You want to read that?
How many verses?
Let me get that open and I'll tell you exactly because I didn't write down where we needed to finish.
Translation you want me to use?
I don't necessarily care which one you use.
All right.
Yep. So, what's that? Oh. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead and read through the first 6 verses. Actually, the first 7 verses.
So I'm reading from the Passion Translation.
Oh, okay.
Okay, is that all right?
Go for it.
All right. If any of you aspires to be an overseer in the church, you have set your heart toward a noble ambition, for the word is true. Yet an elder needs to be one who is without blame before others. He should be one whose heart is for his wife alone and not another woman. He should be recognized as one who is sensible and well behaved and living a disciplined life. He should be a spiritual shepherd who has the gift of teaching and is known for his hospitality. He cannot be a drunkard or someone who lashes out at others or argumentative or someone who simply craves more money, but instead recognized by his gentleness. His heart should be set on guiding his household with wisdom and dignity, bringing up his children to worship with devotion and purity. For he's unable to properly lead his own household well. How could he properly lead God's household? He should not be a new disciple who would be vulnerable to living in the clouds of conceit and fall into pride, making him easy prey for Satan. He should be respected by those who are unbelievers, having a beautiful testimony among them so that he will not fall into the traps of Satan and be disgraced.
That's good. That's good. Notice everything that's mentioned there when it comes to that church leader, and it's talking there specifically about elders in that passage, or pastors could also be the translation there. But it's talking about those kind of spiritual leaders in the church. There's not one of those things that really has to do with ability. It all has to do with character. Now, I'm not saying ability is not important. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here. It's very, very important. Leaders should lead. You know, you have to be able to lead somebody in order to be a leader. But if this isn't in place in your life, if this foundation isn't in place, if these characteristics don't show up, then you're going to see all sorts of trouble when it comes to leadership. It goes on and it says, likewise, deacons, another leadership position in the church, must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given to much wine, not greedy for money, holding to the mystery of the faith and pure conscience. And then again, it goes on. What's it talking about? It's talking about character traits. It's talking about those things needing to be in place in our life. This means being a person of integrity. Let me give you a dictionary definition of integrity. The state of being unified and complete. When a person has integrity, when you and I have integrity, our words and our deeds match up all the time. We're the same person no matter who we're with. We're the same person at church on Sunday as we are at work on Monday, as we are when we're out with our friends on Friday night. We're the same person all the time. It's integrity that kind of goes across the board. Heard about somebody who filled out a job application. They were asked the question, have you ever been arrested? They said no. Then there was a follow-up question that said why, and they didn't realize that they didn't need to answer this. They simply put, because I've never been caught. Now, that's not a person of integrity right there at the end of the day, is it? That's somebody who's just living to be able to fly under the radar and not get noticed and not get caught. Integrity means something is sound through and through. Integrity is living and embodying a virtuous relationship in every encounter, in every circumstance in life. And again, back to our first one, where does this come from? For a believer, this comes out of our relationship with Jesus Christ. It becomes because we want to model him in everything that we do. So the decisions that we make day in and day out, we must be a person of character. Every person, no matter how spiritual they are, is faced with decisions to make every single day about doing the right thing or kind of looking the other way. And if you say you've never been tempted in that, then we need to talk about your problem with lying. Because every single one of us faces those decisions, and we have to know what we're going to do when we get to that point. Socrates said this: the first key to success is to be in reality who you appear to be. Isn't that good? Coming from Socrates even, right? You know, not Jesus, this is Socrates, but sounds like something Jesus would say. The first key to success is to be in reality who we appear to be. When you have character, when you have this integrity in place in your life, that's a characteristic that allows people to trust you and want to follow you. If people understand me, I'll get their attention, but if people trust me, I'll get their action. If people understand me, I'll get their attention. If people trust me, I will get their action. That's why leaders have to live from a higher standard. That's what it's talking about there in 1 Timothy and Titus. We didn't read Titus, but that's the same, almost the same list of characteristics. Character and integrity should precede any kind of appointment into positional leadership. But often this is overlooked. And I want to tell you something. It's not just overlooked in the world, it's overlooked so many times in the church. There's people put in positions of leadership based on a charismatic personality or some kind of extreme gifting in their life. But if character is not in place, there's a fall that's getting ready to happen. Think about how many companies that you know of who've been torn apart by scandal. Think about how many churches you know of that have been torn apart by scandal. Affairs, embezzlement, lying. It not only hurts the leaders, it rocks the organization. That's why it's so foundational and so vital that this be in place when it comes to leadership. Companies or ministries built without character in the leadership blow up. Ministries and corporations that are built on character will grow up. I don't know how many of you are baseball fans. I'm a big baseball guy. In particular, a huge Chicago Cubs fan, so you can forgive me for that later, you Rockies fans that are out there. But if you've been following what's been going on in the baseball world the last couple of weeks, there's been this huge scandal that's been taking place with the Houston Astros, right? They got caught cheating by electronically stealing signs, making those signs available back into the clubhouse, and then through some sort of beating on drums and other sort of symbols, they would let the batters know what the pitcher's next pitch was going to be. Now, stealing signs has always been a part of baseball, but when it becomes electronic, they'd already been warned about that, and it wasn't supposed to take place. The people who were involved in this, the Houston's manager and general manager, both lost their jobs this last week or 2 weeks ago. Why did they lose their jobs? Not because they weren't successful. I'm telling you what, the Astros had been in the World Series a couple of times recently and won the World Series just as recently as a couple of years ago. These guys were knocking it out of the park when it came to the success of their team. They got fired because of integrity, because of character that wasn't in place. It goes beyond that. Alex Cora, who became the manager of the Red Sox, who left the Houston Astros, and the next year, first year as manager, led the Red Sox to the World Series championship, got fired that same week. Why? Because he was with the Astros when this happened, and he was a part of the cheating scandal, and it rocked the foundation, and it began to crumble underneath of him. It goes a step further. Carlos Beltran, who had just taken the job as the manager of the New York Mets, hadn't yet managed his first game. He lost his job because he also was a part of what went on down in Houston. I want you to start to see how important this is and how it can begin to spread when these leadership things aren't in place in our life, when that character is not being modeled in your life. The quality of your character will determine both your longevity in leadership and the quality of your leadership. It's going to incur your longevity, and then let me say this, that may be a better way to put it, it's going to determine the legacy that you leave behind, the things that people will look back for and think of later. It's really, really important, if you ever get in a position of leadership where you have the opportunity to put a team together, where you have the ability to bring people alongside of you and hire people, I want to encourage you to really think about this. I've hired a lot of people over 25 years as being a senior pastor in a church. I've hired and fired a lot of people. And one of the things I've been told and learned is if I were to do it over again, I would probably hire more slowly and fire more quickly. Hire more slowly and really get to know the character of the people that you're hiring. And sometimes when something becomes a cancer in the team and it's beginning to cause problems, don't let it go too long, because that can begin to really tear the team apart. But there's 3 C's when it comes to hiring that I've always kept in mind. The first one's character, the second one's competency, and the third one's chemistry. Character's number 1 because that's the foundation to everything else when it comes to leadership. It's really, really important that character has to be in place. I think competency is important because it means you can get the job done. But let me tell you, I think chemistry is even more important than competency, because I've always said this: you can train just about anybody to do any job if you really like the person and you get along well with the team. It's really, really important to make sure when we hire somebody that those C's are in place, that character's in place, that chemistry's in place, and then they have the ability to do the job, but they can be trained to do the job if you do that. You know, as I said, I hired a lot of people, and I was thinking back, I left the ministry in Indiana in 2002. I'd been at that church for about 9 years and had hired a staff, put together a decent-sized staff. And 10 years after I left the church, 8 of those staff members were still in place. That's unheard of, because most of the time when there's a change of a senior pastor, everybody's cleaned out anyway. You know, first of all, it just kind of seems to happen naturally in the church. But yet a lot of them were still there 8 years later. There's actually one still on staff today who's, in fact, a few others just left in the last year or two. One of the greatest compliments I was ever paid by the senior pastor who took my place, his name's Tim, he's still there, he's been there about 20 years now, but Tim said to me, he said, "Todd, you had an eye for talent." And I wanted to say, no, I didn't really have an eye for talent. I paid attention to things that were important: character, competency, and chemistry. And when you put together a team that's got those things in place, if the character's in place, they're going to have some longevity to them, right? Because there's not anything that they're trying to hide and get away with. If there's good chemistry involved in the team and people enjoy working together and there's competency to get the job done, those things will be in place. So, I will also say this. I don't want to sound like the perfect leader here, because as I got into a larger church, I began to spend less time focused on hiring and gave some of those things to other people, and we didn't pay as much attention to that, and we ended up having several moral situations on our staff that we ended up having, and let me tell you, it hurts. It hurts a leader, it hurts the church, it hurts the organization, it hurts the staff. There's all sorts of things that hurts when you don't pay attention to these things and make sure that that's in place. So the question is this: what's your price? What's your price? What can you be bought for? A person of integrity, person with character, determines ahead of time that they do not have a price. I think of all of the character traits that are listed in the Bible, probably the quintessential one, the most important one in the Bible, is the characteristic of humility. Jesus modeled humility for us, right? I mean, we just read that passage. He's getting down, he's washing the disciples' feet. Why? Because it simply needed to be done, and he didn't think that he was too good to do it. What is humility? Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Sometimes we get messed up with that. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. It's putting other people before yourself. Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, identifies that the level 5 top leadership quality that they possess. A level 5 leader is humility. They're humble about their own contribution, their defining role at the organization, and they model that for other people. That sounds like he's talking about the way that Jesus led, right? Jesus talked about this. Philippians chapter 2. Jesus humbled himself, and he did what? He became obedient to death, even the death on the cross. And he calls us, he says, I want you to do the same thing and lead the same way that I've led you. All right, here's a third characteristic of great leaders. Great leaders lead from a compelling vision. What is vision? Vision is a desirable picture of a great future. How many know what the Bible says in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18? Where there is no vision, the people perish. And what does that mean? If there's no vision, if there's no excitement, if there's no preferred picture of the future that people are working together to go towards, they just kind of die on the vine. They perish. Or as I heard Rick Warren say years ago in the ministry, where there is no vision, the people leave for another parish. Okay, you know that's they don't want to stick around very long. They want to be in a place where vision is evident. Walt Disney is probably one of the greatest examples of a visionary leader that we could even think of here in our country. Anyone who would create the first sound cartoon, the first full color cartoon, the first full-length animated picture when nobody had ever seen any of these things before, had to have an incredible vision. But probably his greatest display of vision are his theme parks. Walt Disneyland, Walt Disney World, those theme parks. Do you know how that happened? The vision came when he took his young daughter to a carnival. He saw the lights, the sounds, the smells that were taking place around him. He heard the music. And he was especially enamored by the merry-go-round, the carousel. And he walked over to that, and as he got closer, the carousel stopped. And the horses were no longer going up and down. And he could see all of the cracks in the paint and all the things that didn't look so good when he got up closer. So when the music stopped and he saw that chipped and cracked paint, he began to have a vision in his mind of a park where the illusion was the reality. And that's when he began to think about his parks and what they were going to look like. He wanted to have a park where the illusion didn't evaporate, where kids and parents came together for this great experience. And after the music stopped and after the ride came to an end and the horses weren't going up and down anymore, that it still looked the same. And that vision became Disneyland and Disney World. You see, visionary leaders are like that. They see this picture of a preferred future, and they're able to get people excited about that and say, I want to go there. Visionary leaders see what is happening, but they also see beyond what is happening to a preferred future, and they're able to rally people and say, let's go there together. Where do you get vision? Vision comes from within. You can't borrow somebody else's vision. You can't Google a vision. You can try to, and you might get some ideas and some things that resonate and become something that kind of starts to burn inside of you, but unless it gets to a point where it does burn inside of you, where it begins to really resonate, where it comes from your belly, where it comes from within, then you won't really have a vision that people could get excited about. If you don't have a clear vision yourself, you can't lead people to come to a higher level. Now, not everyone, as we said earlier, is going to be a positional leader. Not every one of us in this room is ever going to be a CEO, an executive director, a senior pastor, have some level of senior leadership of some kind. So what do you do if you feel called to lead, but you don't have a clear vision? You come alongside somebody else whose vision that you can believe in and you help them accomplish the vision. Somebody whose vision resonates with you and say, I can come with you, we can take this mountain together. The leader's vision and clarity of communication of that vision enables others to be able to do things that they wouldn't normally do, and you can build a great organization that comes in alignment with that vision. When you understand your vision, you don't let others steal that from you. I think back of a critical point when I was just a young pastor, and I'd taken over a church, was running just a few hundred at the time, and we were just starting to begin to get some momentum, begin to get some growth that was taking place. And there was a guy in the church who had been an elder in the church for years, and there was absolutely no way in hell that I was ever going to let this guy become an elder again, because I knew he had a vision that was very different from my vision and had a very controlling impact on the church. I remember a meeting that he had one night where he called me and a couple of the other elders together. And he basically sat down and said, look, here's what the vision is, and you're going to do things my way. And he said, and I am the number one giver in the church, and so you will notice if I'm not here next week. Thank God for one of my elders who looked at him and basically said, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord splits you, okay? You know what happened at that point? The next Sunday, he did leave. And there was such a relief in the church. Offerings actually began to double in the church. Why? Because somebody who didn't have the vision, who tried to oppress the vision, who tried to control and monopolize the vision, was gone. And when that's taken away, then you can begin to move forward and do all those things that need to be done. John Scully, I skipped one. The future belongs to those who see the possibilities before they become obvious. John Scully was the CEO of Coke and Apple Computer. I think he knows a few things about leadership, right? At least positional leadership. The future belongs to those who see the possibilities before they become obvious. As I said, I've spent 25 years as a senior pastor, and I knew this was very, very important for people to get the vision. And honestly, during most of those 25 years, we had two different vision statements that I used, that I had taken the church to. One was 3 phrases. We're going to bring people in, we're going to build them up, and we're going to send them out. We're going to bring people to a relationship with Christ. We're going to help them grow up in the relationship with Him. And then we're going to send them out so that they'll multiply and do that over again. The second one was this. It came from the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. We're going to love God, we're going to love people, and we're going to impact the world. Now, you listen to those two statements and you say, well, what about this? And what about that? Because there's so many things that can be a part of this. I want to encourage you, when you think about vision statements, when you think about getting people to catch a vision and say, this is where we're going to go, keep them short enough. I used to tell my people in the church that I want this to be so simple that every single one of you knows the vision, and I can wake you up in the middle of the night from a dead sleep and you could tell me what the vision was. When we get these paragraph vision statements, nobody can remember them. But here I am telling you one that I haven't used in 15 years, one that I used up till about 10 years ago. Both of those, I've never forgotten them. Because they're simple, they're clear, they're straightforward, and they're very easy to remember. And I think that's really, really important. So when we're talking about vision, it asks the question, what do you see? And I want to ask you, how do you see the future? Do you see the future through eyes of fear, or do you see the future through eyes of faith? A leader that has vision is able to see things through the eyes of faith, because they understand that where they are leading people is where God has called them to lead people. Remember, the Israelites were in slavery in the land of Egypt. And God raised up a deliverer to come to them. And Moses came, and finally, after all of the plagues, Pharaoh said, okay, you can go ahead and take the people out. And they no sooner left Egypt than what happened? Pharaoh changed his mind, right? He came behind them, and he said, I'm coming after you. and they got to the Red Sea. And Moses parted the Red Sea. The Israelites crossed on dry land. After they got to the other side, the Red Sea collapsed back in, and Pharaoh and his armies were trapped. They were drowned in the Red Sea. God had delivered them. They'd seen an incredible miracle take place. What happened next? They began the journey to the land God had said, I'm going to give you. They're guided by God himself through a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They were fed by the hand of God with manna from heaven, day after day after day. And then they get to the edge of this promised land after seeing miracle after miracle take place. And what happens when they get to the edge of the promised land? They say, well, let's send some spies in to check out the land. God said this is a good land. God said this is a land flowing with milk and honey. Let's go check it out. So they sent in 12 people. Remember that? 12 spies went in to the land of Canaan. 12 men went to spy on Canaan. 10 were bad and 2 were good. Did you ever learn that little Sunday school song? 10 of them came back, and they said, there's giants in the land. We can't take the land. The giants are too big. 2 said, yeah, there are giants in the land, but we can take the land because God said he'd give us the land. They had a vision of the future that came from the heart of God. And when you have a vision of the future that comes from the heart of God, you can look at the greatest obstacles and say, boy, those giants are huge, but you know what? That doesn't matter because God said he's going to give us this. And that's what vision allows us to have. It has us that picture of the future. It's tied to faith. It's tied to giving people hope. So if you are a leader, whether we're talking about in an organization or if we're talking about leading in a family or a specific ministry, do you know the vision that you're taking people to? And can you communicate the vision in a clear, compelling way? Here's number 4. Great leaders have a focused direction. A couple of things come to mind when I think about this one. You ever hear the saying, if you chase 2 rabbits, both of them will escape? That's what happens when a leader tries to lead in more than one direction. They don't have a focused direction. If you chase both rabbits, you're never going to catch either one. You need focus. Another thing that comes to my mind is trying to go out and shoot a bow and arrow with no target. You see, if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every single time. You know you're going to be 100% because you set out to shoot at nothing in the first place. See, when the target is clear, when the target is put in place and it's obvious and with it's in range and there's focus and attention on that target, then you can pull back the bow and you can let the arrow fly. And it may hit the bullseye. It may not always hit the bullseye. But guess what? You're going to be a lot closer than if you set out to hit nothing in the first place. And you have that focus. See, there is no success without focus. John Maxwell, he put it this way. Whoops, what did I do here? There you go. The sharper the focus, the sharper you are. The sharper your focus is, the sharper you will be as a leader. What does it take to have a sharp focus? 2 things, priorities and concentration. Just like the target that we were just talking about, right, in that illustration, you need the target. You need to know what the priority is. You have to know what you're going after. But you also need the concentration, be able to focus on that, or you're not going to hit it. A leader who knows the right priorities but lacks concentration will know what to do, but they'll never get it done. They might know what to do, but they're never going to get it done because they don't have concentration. Then take that. A leader who has concentration but not the right priorities, he may be completely focused, but he's completely focused on the wrong things. And you're not going to take people where it is that you needed to go in the first place. So what are you going to focus on? How many of you are familiar with the Pareto principle? Yeah, you heard of the Pareto principle? Sometimes it's called the 80-20 rule. Yeah. Do you realize that when it comes to the 20-80 rule, 20% of the things that we focus on will get 80% of the results? And that's been proven time after time after time. This rule's true across the board in a lot of things. It's not only true when it comes to our focus and concentration. It's true, like they say that 20% of the people in the church do 80% of the work, 20% of the people in the church give 80% of the money. I mean, there's been study after study that has proven this principle to be true over and over again. It's those things that are important, the things that we really need to focus on. When we focus on those things, then we can begin to get the right results. You can never underestimate the unimportance of almost everything. Let me say that again. You can never underestimate the unimportance of almost everything. We make mountains out of molehills. And sometimes the mountains that we make of those molehills were things that didn't need to be mountains in the first place. But when we focus on the right mountains, when we focus on putting the right things in place, then we can begin to see those results. Put it this way. Everyone's going to end up somewhere, but few are going to end up there on purpose. That's what a focused person does. They have that purpose. They know where it is that they're going. Now, this closely relates to what we were just talking about in vision. Because if you have a clear vision, but you don't have real focus on the priorities that are necessary to accomplish that vision, you won't get people to come with you, and you won't be able to accomplish the vision. One of the greatest frustrations, if you've ever dealt with this as a follower, is dealing with a leader who doesn't have focus. Who one week this is the priority, and another week this is the priority, and another week this is the priority, and all of a sudden you feel like you're chasing those two rabbits in different directions, and you don't know where it is that you're going. Jesus modeled focused leadership. He kind of told us what a focused leader looks like. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Why should we fix our eyes on him? Because for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus fixed his eyes on heaven. We're to fix our eyes on Jesus, and then we can continue to have the focus of moving forward. Okay, let's move on. What time is it? 6:05. Okay. Characteristics of a great leader, number 5. Great leaders have contagious charisma. Many people look at charisma as kind of this mystical quality that either you have it or you don't. You're just kind of a natural attraction that draws people to you, that you're either born with it or you're not. I don't think that's true. I think you can increase your charisma, and it's vital for a leader because it's the characteristic of a leader that makes people want to follow you. You understand that it's important as a leader that you have that charisma that makes people want to follow you. An old leadership proverb, you've probably heard it before. I heard it years ago. He who thinketh he leadeth and hath no one following is merely taking a walk. If you don't have people following you, if you don't have that charisma that makes people want to come alongside you and help you fulfill that vision, you're just going to be taking a walk. See, without charisma, without something that attracts people to you and makes them want to follow you, you're going to find yourself just alone and nobody following after you. To make yourself the kind of person that other people want to follow. John Maxwell said this in 21 indispensable qualities of a leader. A couple of things to help you grow in charisma. Number 1, love life. Love life. Be a person that loves life. People want to follow people who enjoy life. Have you noticed that? Think about the people you like to follow. Think about the people you like to hang around. If you want to be more of a charismatic person, begin to act like those people. Those people that are happy, those people who are filled with joy, those people who are excited about life, who just kind of love life. There are people who all the time, they're always sour. You think that life just gives them nothing but lemons all the time, and they suck on those lemons. They've got that sour look. Do you want to follow those kind of people? Do you want to be around those kind of people? I'm talking about the people who pee on their own shoes and they wonder why they're wet at the end of the day. I think we've all known some leaders like that in the past, right? I'm sorry.
It makes sense.
I had him on my staff one time, that guy that peed on his shoes, and I won't go any further because if I told you it was a long time ago, none of you know him. But I might or might not be related to him at some point. Okay, I'll just tell you that much. No one wants to be around people like that. Those are people who are downers every single time. Do you want to be around people who are bitter, who are negative, who are angry, who are depressed, who are negative? See, we're attracted to people who have charisma because they're celebrators and not complainers. We're attracted to people who are joyful, not people who are depressed. We're attracted to people who are positive, not people who are negative. If you want to be charismatic, that simply means that you have the ability to attract people and make them like you and want to follow you. Here's a simple way to be that person. Think about the type of person that you really like to be around and be like that person. Begin to emulate those things that you see that are so important. Here's the second one that Maxwell mentions in that. Put a 10 on every person's head. You want to be a charismatic person, you put a 10 on every person's head. You think of those people as being very, very important people. See, one of the best things we can do to attract other people to us and have the charisma that makes them want to follow us is to make them feel good about themselves. How do you make other people feel good about themselves? I'm not talking about false flattery. That's not going to make people feel better about themselves. Everyone sees through that. It's when you call out the gold in them. When you call them up to a higher level, to see their potential, to see their success, ability for success, their ability to achieve their goals. When you do this, then people begin to think more highly of themselves. And everybody's attracted to somebody who makes them feel better about themselves. It's an incredibly charismatic trait. Dan Ryland said this. He said, "How can you have charisma?" I actually got this on a slide, I guess. How can you have charisma? Be more concerned about making others feel good about themselves than making them feel good about you. How many leaders do you know who are there to make everybody else pat them on the back and feel good about them? That's not the leader. A leader's one who makes everybody else feel better about themselves. You know, when I read that Dan Ryland comment, it reminded me of this verse, Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. That's the standard that the Bible calls us to live by as leaders. Here's number 6. Great leaders are confident. They're confident. Confidence is a cornerstone of leadership. It's difficult for people who don't believe in themselves to have everybody else come alongside them and believe in them and say, I want to follow you. It's got to start with believing in yourself. You can teach a leader to be an effective problem solver. You can teach a leader to be more decisive, a better communicator, how to coach others, how to mentor them, how to hold people accountable. You can teach a lot of fundamentals of leadership. Yet this is one I'm not sure you can really teach. This is one you have to decide inside. Yeah. Do you really believe in yourself? Because if you don't really believe in yourself, if you lack that kind of confidence, it's going to be difficult for others to want to come alongside you. John Maxwell again said, when the leader lacks confidence, the followers lack commitment. Yeah, they're not going to be committed. They're not going to come alongside somebody who doesn't have confidence. Francisco Dao said this, self-confidence is the fundamental basis from which all leadership grows. Trying to teach leadership without first building confidence is like building a house on a foundation of sand. It might have a nice coat of paint, but it will be shaky at best. The confidence has to be in place. What does this look like? Well, some people think, back to that picture we talked about earlier, that this means that you need an overly aggressive form of leadership, that you need to be the loudest voice in the room that we're talking about, that's not self-confidence, that's being a bully. And nobody wants to follow somebody like that. The truth is, people with strong self-confidence, guess what? They don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. They don't have to boss everybody else around because they already know who they are. You see, the people that act like that are usually the people who lack confidence, not the people who have confidence that is able to move forward. See, being overly aggressive is actually a sign of a lack of confidence, not having strong confidence. For the believer, I would say this. Your confidence comes from being secure in your identity. It's all those things that we were talking about this morning in our service and last night, if you were here last night. When you know who you are, when you're secure in what God says about you, and you lead from that place of confidence in your identity as a son or daughter of God, guess what? You don't have to lead to be patted on the back by everybody else. You've already got everything settled in your life. You've already got that confidence because it comes from who you are in Him, and you understand your identity. In other words, what I'm saying is this. We must lead from a place of identity, not for identity. Leaders who lead for identity are people that we're not going to want to follow very long. Those bulls in a china shop, those people who are overly aggressive and they lead in that way, they lead from a place that's not confident in who they are in their identity. Self-confidence comes from the recognized value that the source of our identity has for us. I heard this one time. I think it's really good. A person who says, I don't think I can, is really saying, I don't think I am. It comes from that identity. It comes from that understanding who you are in Christ. Because I am not, I probably cannot. If you don't have that confidence, if you don't understand who you are, you probably won't be able to do it. Self-esteem is typically defined as confidence in one's worth or abilities, but as a Christian, I define self-esteem as having confidence that I am who God says that I am. And when you fail to have confidence in who you are, you will fail to call others up to who they are. So it starts with understanding who we are in Christ. Joshua was getting ready to lead the people. Remember what God said to him? Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. When you can have that kind of confidence when you understand the source of your identity and who you've been called by to be a leader. Number 7, great leaders are competent. It goes beyond confidence. We're talking about competent. We're talking about going beyond vision. We're talking about not just the words you speak and the confidence you show, but the ability that's displayed. John Maxwell said this: a leader's competence is a leader's ability to say it, plan it, and do it in such a way that others know you know how, and then they know they want to follow you. See, it's easy to follow a leader who's competent if those other things are in place. If they just have ability but they don't have character, you're not going to follow them very long. If they have ability but they don't have vision, you're not going to follow them very long. All these other things that we're talking about have to be in place, but competence then comes out of that. So how do you demonstrate competence as a leader? Number 1, you show up every day. Good things come to those who wait. Sometimes those are just the leftovers of those who showed up first. It's important to show up first. It's important to show up on time. It's important to lead the way as a leader. So competent leaders show up not only in body, but they come every day to play. Number 2, do what you say you're going to do. Keep your promises. Keep your word. Your word is your bond. And a leader that is not good in follow through and doesn't do what they say they're going to do, you're not going to want to follow a leader like that. And then the next one is follow through with excellence. I've never met a person that I would consider competent in their job who didn't follow through. who didn't return their emails, who didn't return their phone calls, who didn't do the tasks that they were assigned at the meeting and said that they were going to do, that you never hear from again. You know, those are the people that don't show competence in what they're doing. You know, the Bible actually talks about the importance of competence. Genesis chapter 47, Joseph's brothers are getting ready to move there to Egypt. And so Joseph went to Pharaoh, and he told him, he said, my father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and everything they own, they've come from the land of Canaan, and they're now in Goshen. He chose 5 of his brothers, and he presented them before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked the brothers, what is your occupation? Your servants are shepherds, they replied to Pharaoh, just as our families or as our fathers were. They also said to him, we've come to live here for a while, because the famine is severe in Canaan, and your servants' flocks have no pasture. So now please let your servants settle in Goshen. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them live in Goshen. And then he said this, and if you know of any among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock. Who did he want? He wanted the people who were good at it. Those were the people that were going to take care of his stuff. And then another one that came to my mind in thinking about this, I'm trying to tie all of these back to Scripture because I want you to understand, and I think this is really important to say, that all of these characteristics, while you might find most of these in business books, probably other than that first one that we looked at, guess where they got those things from? All truth is God's truth. And you might read it in a secular setting. If it's true, guess where it came from? It didn't come from the father of lies. It came from the source of truth. And so I wanted to tie all of these things back into Scripture again so that you understand these things all come really based on the Word of God. When Moses was getting ready to get some leaders together for the nation of Israel to begin to do some building, it said, Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom and understanding, with knowledge and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs, for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to encourage all kinds of crafts. I wanted you to see that because I want you to notice that when the Spirit of God comes on the abilities that we've been given, it takes them to a new level. Yeah. I have a feeling these were all guys who were already woodworkers and craftsmen. I don't think, just because the Spirit came on them that all of a sudden they got brand new talents that they never really had before. He just enhances the talents that He's given to us. And when we understand that's where our competency can be taken to a new level because of our dependence upon Him, or our confidence can be taken to a new level. Okay, let's go to number 8. Great leaders are secure. It's really hard to follow someone who's insecure, isn't it? It really is. If they feel threatened by everything that you do, it's really hard to follow someone like that. Competence will never compensate for insecurity. Again, another John Maxwell quote. I love John Maxwell's stuff on leadership. It's so good. He said this, you can't lead people if you need people. Think about that for a minute. You can't lead people if you need people. If you're needy and insecure and codependent, and you need affirmation from the people who are to be your followers, you'll never be able to lead them where you want to go. Andrew Carnegie said, no person will make a great leader who wants to do everything himself or wants to get all the credit. Yeah. Because if you're insecure, you want to get all the credit, right? If you're insecure, you're going to want everybody to pay attention to you and give you all of the glory for all the success that takes place. So, I think this is important. What are some traits of insecure leaders? Because I think we need to ask ourselves, are we secure in our ability to lead, whether it's in our home or our school or our church or in business, wherever it is? Are we secure? Number one, insecure leaders don't provide security for others. Do the people around you feel secure because of your leadership? We talked about this earlier. You can't give to others what you don't have. Just as people without skill can't impart skill to other people, leaders who are not secure or will never make their followers be able to feel secure. For a leader to be successful, they've got to be able to offer security to their followers. Number two, insecure leaders take from others more than they give to them. What's that saying? It's talking about the fact that insecure people are on a constant quest to take approval and validation from the people underneath of them. They need acknowledgement. They need love. They need to be recognized. They're primarily taking from other people, and people who need to take from other people are never going to be secure, and they're never going to be good leaders. Number three, insecure leaders are going to constantly limit their best people. Yeah. Why? Well, number one, their best people aren't going to stay around very long. Their best people are going to leave. And if they're insecure, they're always going to try to hire somebody or bring somebody alongside of them into a position that they don't think is going to show them up, and so it's going to put the ceiling on the ability to be able to lead and to go forward. They limit their best people. They won't be able to celebrate their victories because they're always afraid that they're going to show them up in some way. But only secure leaders can truly empower other people to move forward. When a leader is insecure, the more successful his people are, the more threatened he will feel, and the harder he will work to either consciously or subconsciously put a ceiling over their success. He wants to limit their success. And then ultimately, the same thing's true of the organization. Insecure leaders will constantly limit their organization. You know, everything rises and falls on leadership. And if you want to take the temperature of the organization, put the thermometer in the mouth of the leader. Everything about the organization rises and falls on leadership, and so it has to be. There has to be a security there. So let's contrast that then with a secure leader. Secure leaders, on the other hand, those are the people that empower other people. The more secure a leader is, the more he can empower others to move forward. He can believe in them. Why? Because he already believes in himself. But if you don't believe in yourself first, you won't be able to lift up other people. Number two is secure leaders are able to set others up for success without feeling threatened by their success. Boy, when you're secure, and you're secure in your identity as a son or daughter of God, and you're not leading for approval, you're leading for the audience, of one that we talked about earlier, and the fear of man is not in place in your life, and you're not looking for validation, you're not looking for promotion, you're already secure in who you are, then you can begin to lead in a way that takes other people and takes the whole organization to a higher level, because you don't have to worry about being threatened by other people. You've already got that security settled. Number three, secure leaders allow the team to get the credit. They don't take all the credit for themselves. Boy, that's another good one. And then number four, secure leaders fully trust God for their provision, progress, promotion, and protection. Yeah. You know, when you're secure as a leader, then you can raise up other leaders. You understand that? But you can't raise up other leaders if you aren't, first of all, secure in who you are as a leader. In the Bible, Moses trained up Joshua as a successor. Let me ask you a question. Who did Joshua train up? Nobody. Maybe that's why God had to constantly be reminding Joshua, be strong and courageous, remember who you are, because I think maybe he had a tendency to forget. Maybe he struggled with this area of security. Elijah trained up Elisha. Jesus trained up the 12. You have Paul training up Timothy. Great leaders who are secure in who they are, those are the people that can train up the next generation of great leaders. They must be very generous with the power of their office, and they must be extremely secure. Great leaders are continually sharing, teaching, and demonstrating so that their successors can see what needs to be done. What time is it? It's about time to wrap up. We'll do this number 9, and I'll save number 10. We'll hit that the next time. Great leaders are excellent communicators. For the leader, communication is connection and inspiration, not just the transfer of ideas. You know, we were talking about vision earlier and the fact that it's so important to have this vision, this picture of the preferred future, and be able to call people up to their best and to do that. All that takes this kind of communication ability that we're talking about. You've got to be able to not just see it, not just understand it, but you have to be able to speak it in a way that excites other people and makes them come alongside you. Good leaders must be able to communicate that vision, those ideas, that knowledge, that urgency, and their enthusiasm to other people. You know what? If a leader can't communicate vision clearly to others and motivate them to fulfill the vision, then the vision and the message that they have don't really even matter, because it's not going to be successful if they can't motivate them. So for the leader, again, communication is connection and inspiration, not just the transfer of ideas. Let me hit a few things underneath of this that you need to remember when it comes to leadership. When it comes to communicating as a leader, remember this: authenticity matters. It matters a lot. They need to be able to see your heart. They need to understand who you are, that you're honest and sincere. Susan Tardanico, I can't remember how you pronounce that, but anyway, she said this: forget about eloquence and worry about being real. Authenticity matters. It matters a lot. Also, I think it's important that we remember that visibility is a form of communication. If you want to communicate well with the people that are following after you, don't be out of sight. Be somebody who is seen. When it comes to a business setting, when it comes to a work environment, don't just be known by your emails. Let them see your face. Let them hear your heart. Be authentic. Be transparent. Communicate that vision. Show up in person as much as possible. When it comes to communicating, remember this: listening is a powerful skill. Most of us are not good listeners. You understand that? We're always, if you're like me, we have this tendency to be thinking of the thing that we're going to say next instead of really listening to what it is that people have to say to us. It's really, really important to develop listening as a powerful skill. When we listen to other people, we gain a clearer understanding of their perspective and knowledge. Listening fosters trust, respect, and openness. I think it's important as a leader to allow people to air their gripes and complaints. Ask people open-door questions and let them tell you how they really feel. And when they do that, very, very important. Important with your kids. It's important with your spouse. It's important in any area that you're leading in. Make sure you pay attention not just to what they say, pay attention to what they don't say. There's a lot that's communicated through what's not talked about. There's a lot that's communicated to what's left unsaid. Gerald McGinnis, the CEO of Respironics, said, value your listening time roughly 10 times more than your talking time. It's more important to be a good listener sometimes than a good talker. That's still part of communication. So, tips to become a better communicator. Number 1, communicate relentlessly. Communicate information, communicate thoughts, communicate ideas. Do it frequently and do it very, very clearly. Keep the processes open and transparent and find ways to help smooth the path of communication for the team that you're leading. Number 2, simplify and be direct. Say what you mean, but do it simply and do it directly. Don't let people leave wondering, what was he really saying? What were they trying to get across? Be direct, be simple, be clear in what you are trying to say. You can also be a better communicator when you listen and encourage input, what we were just talking about a moment ago. We'll just kind of go on through that. Number 4, illustrate through stories. Stories can communicate, a lot of things. Well, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. The picture that we paint through stories communicates so much as we're trying to get across vision to people. And then number 5, affirm with actions. You will not be a good communicator if people hear you say one thing and see you do another thing. You got to be authentic again, back to that authenticity, and you got to be clear on the messages you're speaking, but also be clear on the messages that you're speaking without saying a single word through the things that you do. It's really, really important to think about. Just a couple of verses on this, and then we'll wrap up. Colossians 4:6, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So communication is very, very important. And then I love this about listening, Proverbs 18:13. To answer before listening is folly and shame. When we try to answer before we've heard, when we already have our minds made up, when we think that we know it all, then we're going to we'll be taken down. And that leads us to the last one, and we're not going to do that one tonight. We'll come back to it. But great leaders are people who do listen, and they do learn, and they're teachable people. And we'll talk about that when we get back together in a couple of weeks. Any questions tonight? Anything we've talked about? I know you guys had a long day. You're tired. I don't want to keep you any longer than you were planning on. What? I can't hear you. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. That's right. All right. Wow. Norel, you want to wrap up here?
Yeah, can we give Todd a really, great ovation for that?
Thank you.
People spend a lot of money to hear that. And I think now we know why we asked him to speak on this.
Oh,
Absolutely. It was just absolutely wonderful. And I love the way, because for all of us, God has us positioned strategically where He has you right now. I was just thinking back to the beginning of today, and also the beginning of our school year in the beginning of September, and we talked about the significance of this year being that we were stepping up into acknowledging, recognizing, and walking into our spheres of influence, and that's what you all came up with today in terms of when Todd was asking how do we see what leadership is. I want to pray into that right now. Lord, I just thank you that each person sitting here is known of you, is part of your plans, that some might think, well, I'm employed or occupied and doing things that seem less important than someone else. And so, Lord, I just want to speak in to each person, into the very core of who you are, and say you are known and loved by God, and what you carry is significant right now. Not for the future, not that it doesn't mean for the future, but right now. Holy Spirit living within you enables you to touch, influence, bring transformation into the very atmosphere of where you are positioned, in your home, in the street in which you live, in the community that you engage in a workplace. And so, Lord, today I would pray that we've got these next 2 weeks before we meet again and pick up on the area of leadership. I would just pray that you would prompt each person to see how significantly you have them positioned, that you've led into this very time, that their being part of this class is right on what you are doing for them, that you will bring to their attention that which you are using them for in terms of influence and extending the kingdom right where you have them now. And I also pray that as you are doing that intentionally with us, you will also enable us to be deaf to the insinuations, accusations, and deception of the enemy. That we will not hear the way he would subtly come in with a tiny bit of truth that we identify and then go along with his lies that are not consistent with who you say we are. And so we pick up on what Todd said and we bless who you are in Jesus. No one else like you. We bless your identity. We speak into it wholeness and also that confidence that today you go out knowing who you are in Jesus. Yes, on a journey, but amazingly equipped because of him for everything that the rest of this day holds for tomorrow, for the rest of the week. And I speak over you right now, blessing in the name of Jesus. Amen. Great having you all here. We will miss you next Sunday. I am trying to get incredibly excited about watching television next Sunday afternoon and all that.